सर्वोपनिषदो गावः दोग्धा गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्स सुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत् मय्यासक्त मनाः पार्था योगं युञ्जन् मदाश्रयः असंशयं समग्रं मां यथा ज्ञास्यसि तच्छृणु ज्ञानं तेहं सविज्ञानम् इदं वक्ष्यामि अशेषतः यज्ञात्वा नेह भूयोऽन्यज् ज्ञातव्यम् अवशिष्यते मनुष्याणां सहस्रेषु कश्चित् यतति सिद्धये यततामपि सिद्धानां कश्चिन्मां वेत्ति तत्त्वतः भूमिरापो नलो वायुः कम्मनो बुद्धिरेव च अहंकार इतीयं मे भिन्ना प्रकृतिरष्टद अपरेयं मितस्त्वन्यां प्रकृतिं विद्धि मे परां जीवभूतां महाबाहो एदं धार्यते जगत् मत्तः परतरं नान्यति किञ्चिदस्ति धनञ्जय मयि सर्वम् इदं प्रोतं सूत्रे मणिगणा इव. Quite an exhilarating portion of the Gita. It is exhilarating because this is that segment of the Gita where Bhagavan introduces himself. It is so very exhilarating that the journey of knowing him begins right at this very segment of the Gita. Arjuna, towards the end of the 6th chapter, asked two very important questions. We discussed in detail Arjuna's questions 8 and 9, and also Krishna's response to both those questions. After having listened to the very process of Ashtanga Yoga, after Krishna's exposition on Dhyana Yoga, Arjuna had a very fundamental question. Like all of us, Arjuna also was not sure as to how this mind can be controlled, how one can master one's mind. Because mind by design is chanchala, is restless. Chanchalam hi manah Krishna pramati balavadridham tasyaham nigraham manye vayoriva sudushkaram. This was Arjuna's 8th question. How to fix this mind? In simple terms, this was Arjuna's query. It is very clear that one can achieve progress in one's journey of life only when one fixes one's mind. But how to fix it? The task looks formidable, almost impossible. On top of it, Arjuna also had another very important question. Ayatihi shraddhayopetaha yogat chalitamanasaha aprapya yoga samsiddhim kam gatim Krishna gacchati. Even if one somehow tries to control one's mind, starts to practice, endeavors to walk on this path shown by you, hey Krishna, mind gets distracted very easily. By design, the mind is aligned with the world, and therefore the world distracts the mind so very easily that one easily gets carried away from the right path. So even if one endeavors with all earnestness, with all right intentions, with all enthusiasm on this path that you have explained, hey Krishna, it is quite difficult to remain on the path. To sustain the momentum is almost impossible because of the nature of the mind. Without mastering the mind, it is almost impossible, even if one starts off in the right direction on the journey, yoga samsiddhi, attaining the goal, is almost impossible because one gets naturally distracted and deviated. Krishna, therefore, gives a very simple answer to Arjuna. And we discussed the answer in detail. Krishna's answer in the 6th chapter to Arjuna's question was a very simple formula. Abhyasa and Vairagya. Practice and detachment. If we see the first 6 chapters of the Gita, spiritual progress, the path of spiritual progress, the prescribed path is built on the foundation of detachment. And Krishna's answer, simple and profound, is definitely the answer. But is it complete in all respects is a question that possibly not only plagued Arjuna's mind, but possibly Krishna also wanted to take it in steps. So therefore, while Krishna gave a simple, straightforward answer to Arjuna's question, prescribing Abhyasa and Vairagya, Krishna also concluded the 6th chapter by essentially indicating to Arjuna that the answer to his question is still not complete. Krishna declared, Yoginam api sarvesham madgaterantaratmana shraddhavan bhajate yomam same yukta tamo mataha. Talking about the various paths available, talking about the various means, the way different kinds of yogis, Krishna celebrates bhakti and the yogi who practices bhakti yoga as the supreme. And therefore, Krishna indicates to Arjuna that the answer to his question, both his questions 8 and 9, is not yet complete. And thus, Krishna continues his answer, and the 7th chapter begins, which is a continuation of Krishna's answer to Arjuna's question. Arjuna's question, if we take both 8 and 9, we can frame it in one simple, a simple question. Frame the question in a simple terms as to how to fix the mind. How to fix the mind. And Krishna's answer is going to be now very, very simple again. And this completes his earlier answer of Abhyasa and Vairagya. Krishna's answer is, hey Arjuna, to fix your mind, fix the mind on me. We can fix the mind by fixing it on Krishna. This is where now we see a grand transition happening in the Gita. So Krishna here clearly says that, hey Arjuna, it is very important to realize that the mind by design has several layers of filters. And we have seen this before. Materially tainted. It's like how if I have a red colored lens in front of my eyes, everything that I see is red in color. If I have a green colored lens in front of my eyes, the same thing that was reddish before becomes greenish now. everything that I see is colored. Similarly, the mind is tainted. When the mind, for example, is tainted by greed, everything that we look around will have a tag of money. Everything, there will be only dollars on every object. The way we see the world through the mind depends on how the mind is tainted. The mind binds us to the world and at the same time blinds us to reality. And therefore, it becomes crucial that this mind, which is by design attached to the world, needs to be detached from the world. And that's the reason why Krishna prescribes vairagya. Krishna prescribes detachment as foundational to one's spiritual journey. But then, detaching from the world is almost impossible. It is so very formidable that it is not easy at all. It may take several lifetimes and more. Practice, practice, and practice. While it will take us forward, it may take a lot of time to reach a state where we can get fully detached from the world. And that's exactly Arjuna's doubt as well. And this is where Krishna makes the transition. Now, moving forward, we will see not detachment as the foundation of one's spiritual journey, rather attachment becomes foundation of one's spiritual journey. One may think, is Krishna going to contradict himself? 6 chapters he spent talking about detachment, and then how come suddenly he can conflict himself and talk about attachment as foundational? The difference is the direction of our attachment here. Attachment to Krishna becomes foundational to our spiritual journey. This is where the grand transition happens. The emphasis in the Gita shifts from detachment to attachment. Detachment from the world, attachment to Krishna. Where Krishna is going to teach how detachment from the world would become a natural byproduct of attachment to Krishna. Instead of struggling to detach from the world, one needs to, when one attaches to Krishna, there is no longer struggle to detach from the world. Therefore, the 7th chapter begins with a very important formula. Maya sakta manaha. Mayi asakta manaha. This is possibly one of the most important phrases to remember, because this is what the transition is all about. Transitioning from detachment as the foundation of one's spiritual journey to attachment to Krishna as the foundation of one's spiritual journey. Maya sakta manah patta yogam yunjan madashrayaha asamshayam samagram mam yatagyasyati tatshunu. Arjuna's question gets answered completely through this shloka, through this declaration of Krishna. Mai asakta manaha. With the mind attached to Krishna. Asakta manaha. Mind attached to Krishna. With the mind attached to Krishna. Mai asakta manaha. Yogam yunjan with the mind attached to Krishna, Yogam Yunjan, engaging in performing yoga, contemplation, constant contemplation of Krishna. Yoga also staying connected with Krishna. Yujyate iti yoga. Staying connected with the mind attached to Krishna. Yogam Yunjan, by performing yoga, that is constantly contemplating on Krishna, staying connected with him. Mad Ashrayaha. Krishna says, one continues to experience Krishna as one's shelter, realizing that Krishna is my shelter, and therefore experiencing that inseparability from him, unable to bear separation. Mayasakta manah partha yogam yunjan mad ashrayaha asamshayam samagram mam yata jnasyasi. Asamshayam, without any doubt. Asamshayam samagram, in totality. One's doubts get completely cleared. Asamshayam samagram. Jnasyasi. Jnasyasi or samagram can be added to asamshayam or jnasyasi as well. Asamshayam samagram. Samagram jnasyasi. Samagram is in totality. Samagram jnasyasi. One gets to know Krishna in totality. One gets to know him fully, completely. One gets to realize him. Tachshunu. Now the question, Mayasakta mana partha, the process of attaching Krishna, attaching the mind to the Krishna, engaging in constant contemplation, staying connected with him, and realizing, experiencing Krishna as the shelter all the time, with all the doubts completely getting cleared. And when one engages in this process, one will get to know Krishna in totality. One gets to know, realize his nature. And how can this process be executed? Krishna says, let me tell you how. Tachshunu. Therefore, Arjuna, you must listen attentively. Krishna, therefore, in the process of answering Arjuna's question, also takes the opportunity to introduce Arjuna the third tattva. In the first 6 chapters of the Gita, Krishna covered 2 tattvas, the Achit tattva and the Chit tattva. Matter, Prakriti, Purusha, the individual souls. Now, the third, Ishvara tattva, Paramatma tattva, Bhagavad tattva, the third important tattva, which rules the other 2. Krishna takes the opportunity to introduce the third tattva, introduce himself. Now, this all-important shloka, right at the beginning of 7th chapter, can also be relished by looking at how Krishna takes the opportunity to answer Arjuna's question, linking his earlier conclusion. Yoginam api sarvesham madgatena antaratmana shraddhavan bhajate yo mam same yukta tamo matah. There, Krishna clearly said, of all the yogis, the one who practices bhakti yoga is the highest yoga, supreme yogi. Now, there he says, what is the goal? He says, how to become a bhakti yogi. What is the goal there? Madgatena antaratmana. One who practices bhakti yoga has attained a state where Krishna says, Madgatena shraddhavan bhajate yoma. With shraddha, one who worships, one who loves Krishna and does devotional service to him all the time, one reaches a state, Madgaten Antaratmana, his mind is fixed on Krishna all the time. One is completely, one's mind is attached to Krishna. And therefore, that is the reason why one who practices Bhakti Yoga with the mind fixed on Krishna, when the mind is attached to Krishna, the world gets detached as a byproduct. So therefore, the attachment of the mind to Krishna becomes the goal to reach. In response to Arjuna's question, how to fix the mind? Chanchalam himana Krishna. How do I master my mind? Krishna's answer is, mastery of the mind is possible when the mind is offered to the master. When the mind is attached to Krishna. So therefore, Maya Sakta Manaha is the goal. Now, how to reach that goal? So the same shloka, we can relook at in a different order. We can look at a ladder of steps to reach that goal of Maya Sakta Manaha. Now here, Krishna looks at Arjuna and says, Arjuna, Shrunu, you must listen attentively. Arjuna, no wonder, no doubt, is listening to Krishna. But still, Krishna emphasizes on this word, Shrunu, listen. Because Shravana is so very important in one's spiritual journey. Shravana reveals the path. In the shloka that we relish, Maya Saktamana Partha Yogam Yunjar Madashraya Asamshayam Samagram Mam Yata Jnasasi Tat Shrunu. Shravana, hey Arjuna, Tat Shrunu. Shrunu, by listening, the path will be revealed, the path to know Krishna. One way to look at this path is starting from Maya Saktamanaha, by attaching to the mind to Krishna, the path Shravana leads all the way to knowing Krishna. Samagram Nyasyasi. So Shrunu, Shravana reveals the path. Shravana shows the path to knowing Krishna. Shravana not only shows the path, Shravana can also become the path. Shravana is the path itself. Now, the same shloka, we can relish it in a different way, which will answer Arjuna's question as to how to fix the mind. Hey Arjuna, Shrunu, listen attentively. Shrunu, therefore Shravana becomes the very first step. So now Shravana becomes the path. Nyasyasi samagram. This becomes the second step. Shrunu nyasyasi samagram. Now, by listening attentively, carefully, all the time, repeatedly, one will get to know Krishna. Not just know Krishna in totality. Know him. Not just know about him, but know him. Now, knowing about Krishna is important. That is at the early stages of one's journey. From knowing about Krishna, one needs to elevate oneself to knowing Krishna. Knowing about Krishna is receiving content. Knowing Krishna is experiencing Krishna. And continuously experiencing him, one realizes his nature. So here, Shravana as the very path, Krishna says, Shrunu Nyasyasi Samagram, second stage. Third stage, Asamshayam. When we know Krishna, then there are no more doubts. Asamshayam. When we start to experience him, Vidyate Hridaya Granthi Chidyante Sarvashamsayaha Shiyante Chasya Karmani Tasmin Drishte Paravare. As the Upanishad declares, the moment we start experiencing Krishna, Vidyate Hridaya Granthi, all the knots in the hearts, they just get cut, they melt away. So Krishna is the greatest solvent. He dissolves all our doubts, all the doubts get cut. Chidyante sarvasamshayaha, all the doubts vanish. Kshiyante chasya karmani, all papa karmas also, all karmas are also burnt. So asamshayam is the third stage. Shrunu Nyasyasi shamagram asamshayam. Fourth step, ashrayam, ashrayaha. With all the doubts completely eradicated, knowing him fully, when we know him, when we know Krishna, when we know his nature, his swarupa, his rupa, his guna, his vibhuti, his aishwaryam, we know that he is our ashraya, he is our only shelter. No, we have no doubts, no more doubts. He not only becomes, we know that he is our only shelter. And the fifth step, therefore, is yogam yunjan. When we realize Krishna as our only shelter, that realization manifests automatically as bhakti to him. No, we don't anymore ask questions as to why I should do bhakti to Bhagavan, why I should worship him, why I should pray to him. No questions asked. Our devotional service automatically manifests out of the realization, out of the knowledge of Krishna's nature, and knowing him as our only ashraya. Yogam yunjan becomes fifth step, and sixth step becomes asaktamanaha. So asaktama, the goal which is attained, where one reaches a stage where the mind is completely attached to Krishna, completely aligned. So bhakti is 100% alignment to Bhagavan. As long as there is misalignment, so all the sorrows, all the miseries of samsara is only because of this misalignment. Greater the degree of misalignment, greater the sorrows. So therefore, when there is total alignment, when the mind is completely attached to Krishna, asaktamanaha, mai asaktamanaha, when Krishna says, when the mind is attached to me completely, then, hey Arjuna, Krishna says, you don't need to worry about how to detach from the world. That is taken care of. So, thus, Krishna clearly makes this takes this opportunity to introduce himself. Therefore, Arjuna now says, so therefore, I need, the natural question is, then I need to know you more, hey Krishna. You have been right in front of me, but I have still not known you. Now, so all of a sudden, you are like a stranger. Jnanam teham savijnanam idam vaksham yaseshataha yajnatva neha bhuyo nyajil jnatavyam avisishyate. In order for you to attach to me completely and be aligned to me completely and do bhakti to me, and therefore in that process detach from the world, and in that process master your mind, it is important that you need to know jnana and vijnana, knowledge of Bhagavan's swarupa, and vijnana, differentiating knowledge, how to know, not only know him, but also know him as distinct and different from every other entity. And when one knows this jnana and vijnana, one gets this jnana and vijnana, Krishna says, there is nothing else to know in this world. Manushyanam sahasreshu kaschit yatati siddhaye yatatam api siddhanam kaschinmam vetti tattvataha. This process is not easy at all. Krishna says it is very important. So he also gives Arjuna the assurance. When you know me, hey Arjuna, when you know me fully and when your mind is completely attached to me, when you offer your mind completely to me, then there is no more struggle. There is no more struggle in your spiritual journey, and your mind mastery comes to you very naturally. Now here we can easily understand this, taking the analogy of the houses that we live. Now, when we stay in a rented house, many times when we continue to stay for a long in a place, we start getting attached to the house. Even though it is a rented house and we know we need to move on any time, we start building that attachment as though it's going to remain forever and we are going to remain there forever, and as though we own it forever. It is very important to constantly keep reminding that this is temporary. This world, which is a house, also is a temporary. And we need to constantly keep reminding ourselves, this is not the place where we belong. Now, the only way to stop attaching to this rented house of ours is if we know that we have a magnificent palace, which is our own, which where we belong to, awaiting us, which is not temporary, which is eternal, which is always there for us. That knowledge that it is available for us would automatically ensure that we do not get attached to this temporary house we live in. So Krishna, therefore, here emphasizes to Arjuna how to transit from struggling to detach from the world and to focus on attaching to Krishna. Now, this process, Krishna says, this process also is not straightforward and easy. It's relatively simple, but Krishna also gives a caveat. He says, Manushyanam sahasreshu kaschid yatati siddhaye yatatam api siddhanam kaschin mam verti tatpataha. Out of thousands and thousands of people, millions of people, only hardly one endeavors, strives on this path to attain perfection. And out of those thousands, only hardly one amongst thousands, one amongst millions of those who strive to attain perfection gets to know Krishna as the means to attain perfection. And of those who strive on this path, knowing Krishna as the means, one amongst thousands and thousands of people alone get to know him completely, in totality. Know him as both the means and the goal. Now, this statement of Krishna should not be a deterrent. Rather, in fact, it is an assurance to us. One may ask how. It's daunting when we listen to this declaration of Krishna, when he says one amongst thousands and thousands of people, only strive. And of those who strive, one amongst thousands of people alone eventually reach the goal. Instead of focusing on how far we are from Krishna, it is important to focus on how close we are to Krishna. This shloka should be assuring to us. Why? Because we are blessed to be one amongst those rare, special, privileged, chosen few who are already on this path, getting on the path of reaching him, reaching Krishna. So here, Krishna very clearly tells Arjuna that Arjuna, knowing me, therefore, is crucial in the process of mastering your mind, which the prerequisite for that is attaching your mind to Krishna. Only when we know him, when we start to know him, when we start to experience him, the mind will automatically start gravitating towards him and eventually get completely attached to him. And it's in this context, Krishna, in the 7th chapter of the Gita, introduces himself and presents various fascinating facets of his Swarupa. Bhagavan is Jagat Karana. His Jagat Karanatva is highlighted. He is the Akhila Karana, he is Nishkarana, he is Adbhuta Karana. He is the cause of all causes. He is the one who is the source. He is the source of everything in this universe. And Krishna introduces the two other tattvas as his twin properties. Both the Chit Tattva and Achit Tattva belong to him as his two twin properties, inseparable properties. And he, Ishvara, is the ruler who rules over both Prakriti and Purusha, the world of matter and all the individual souls. He is Jagat Karana. He is Sarvadhara. He is the one who supports and sustains everything in this universe. Matta parataram nanyati kinchidasti dhananjaya mai sarvam idam protam sutre maniganaiva. We may not perceive Krishna very easily, but Krishna says, just like how he gives a beautiful example of a necklace, a row of gems. While we see the gems, we don't see the thread that connects them, supports them, and sustains the necklace. Krishna is Sarvadhara. And there is no but Mattah Parataram Nanyat. Apara, Para, Paratara. Apara, Prakriti, which is the world of matter. Achit Tattva, Para, Chit Tattva, all the Jivatmas, the individual souls. Paratara, he is the supreme, the ruler. And he is Sarvadhara. He is not only Sarvadhara, Krishna also says he is Niyanta. He is the controller within. He pervades and permeates for only one reason, to control every entity from within. And it is in this chapter, Krishna also, in the process of explaining his nature, his Swarupa, he also says, I am the Shariri, this Jagat, and this is Sharira. Every Jivatma is the Sharira of the Paramatma. Prakriti is Paramatma Sharira. The Shariri Bhava also gets introduced here, which means the Shariri not only supports and controls, but also the Sharira exists only for the sake of the Shariri. Now, this is where the analogy of the body-soul relationship, through that analogy, we can understand our relationship with Krishna. The soul, the individual soul, supports, controls the body, and the body exists only for the sake of the soul. It is a utility for the soul. Similarly, every Jivatma and every entity, Chit and Achit, are Sharira of the Shariri, who is Krishna, Bhagavan. So Krishna gives several facets of his Swarupa. He is Jagat Karana, he is Sarvadhara, he is Niyanta, and he is Shariri. Now immediately Arjuna has this doubt. Arjuna does not ask an explicit question, but immediately Arjuna can ask this question. How come then this knowledge, nobody knows you, your nature is not known? Krishna gives a simple answer. Hey, Arjuna, the answer is very simple. It is because of the curtain of Maya. This is Prakriti. Prakriti weaves, and therefore my nature is not clearly known. Daivi Hesha Gunamayi Mama Maya Duratyaya. my lower nature, Prakriti, the world is this world which is made of this Prakriti, made of three gunas, completely wields my nature, and therefore it is not easy. It's like a curtain, dark curtain that completely obscures, and one caught in this world of Maya, immersed in worldliness, fails to recognize me, fails to know me. And the only way to know me is to cross over this ocean of Maya. Daivi Hesha Gunamayi Mama Maya Turatyaya. The only way to cross over this ocean of Maya is Mamevaye Prapadyante Mayametam Tarantite. The only way is to surrender to me. Only when one surrenders to Krishna, one can cross over the ocean of Prakriti, cross over the ocean of samsara. The immediate question is then, how come nobody surrenders to you? If surrendering to you is the answer, is the solution to all the problems, how come nobody surrenders to you? Krishna says, that is exactly the reason. Let me tell you, I can classify people into broadly two broad categories, and within each categories, there are four subclasses. Dushkritinaha, Sukritinaha. There are two categories of people here, Arjuna. There is one category which is Dushkritinaha, who have people who have accumulated Papa Karma. It is impossible for them, leave alone surrender, it is impossible for them to even recognize me and approach me. No, Sharanagati. Agati means approach. Sharana, refuge. Sharanagati is approaching Krishna as the sole refuge, as the only means. Dushkritinaha, those who have accumulated so much of Papa Karma, will not approach Krishna at all, because their direction is in the opposite. They are in the opposite direction. They are going far, far away from Krishna in the opposite direction. They do not recognize him, they ignore him. Namam dushkritino moodaha prapadyante naradamaha mayaya apahritajnana asuram bhavamashritaha. So dushkritinaha, within dushkritinaha there are four subclasses. Moodaha, naradamaha, mayaya apahritajnana asuram bhavamashritaha. All these four classes of people will not even approach Krishna. For them, he does not exist. Or even if they grudgingly exist, also look at him, they have hatred towards him. Mudaha, those who are ignorant, they do not know him at all. They have perverted knowledge, completely distorted view of reality. Naradamaha, while they are human beings, but they are animalistic in nature. There is no way they can approach Bhagavan and approach him as the means to progress. Mayaya apahrita jnana, those who are deluded by Maya, those whose intellect is completely deluded, and therefore they also, because of the power of Maya, of Prakriti, they also cannot approach Krishna. Asuram bhavamashritaha, the asuri, those who are harmful, they hate Bhagavan. So this is one class, four subclasses belonging to the class of Dushkritinaha. And the other class of Sukritinaha, they are the ones who definitely approach me here, Arjuna, but each of them, there is varying degrees of approach and varying degrees of acknowledging Krishna as the means. This is where Krishna introduces the celebrated category of four bhaktas. Chaturbida bhajante mam janas within Arjuna artho jignasu rattati jnani cha bhartarshava. Four kinds of devotees who approach him, recognize him as the means. But unfortunately, not all of them recognize me as the goal. Recognizing Krishna only as the means. Artaha, Artati, Jignasu, all three of them recognize Krishna as the means, but do not recognize him as the goal. Jnani alone recognizes Krishna as the goal of all goals. Not only is the means, he is also the goal. Tesham jnani nityayuktaha eka bhaktir vishishyate priyo hi jnaninotyartam aham sachama priyaha. That jnani is so very dear to me, and I am very dear to him. Who is that jnani, that supreme bhakta? Nityayuktaha eka bhakti. He is ever united with me. Nitya yuktaha, ever connected with me, stays connected with me all the time, in blissful communion all the time, cannot bear my separation. It is like he becomes like fish out of water, when even thinking of separation from Krishna. Nitya yuktaha eka bhakti, undivided love for Krishna, undivided love. His love does not get distributed across. Eka bhakti. He knows that Bhagavan, Krishna is the one who can grant moksha, and he alone is the ultimate goal. And therefore, his bhakti is eka bhakti, undivided attention, undivided focus. He considers Bhagavan as the goal of all goals. That he is a supreme bhakta. He is the one who has realized Krishna in totality. Now, when our life is a series of experiences, every experience has a means and a goal. When there is no knowledge of Bhagavan, when the knowledge is only worldly in nature, when the mind is tainted, each of our experiences, the goals which drive our experiences and the means, which are all worldly, and therefore every experience is an admixture of pain and pleasure. That is why our experiences keep fluctuating all the time between pain and pleasure. It's an admixture of pain and pleasure. Only when the goal is Krishna and the means is Krishna, every experience becomes joyful. Therefore, a bhakta has continuously experiences Krishna. And that experience is so very blissful, so very joyful all the time, in constant communion with Krishna, staying connected with him, blissfully contemplating on him, and experiencing Krishna's glory all the time. And when in that state, he is completely detached from the world and his mind is completely mastered, there is no need to even ask this question: will the mind be in a state, calm and steady state, in a state of composure and equanimity all the time? It remains balanced. Because why? The balancing act is being done by Krishna himself. Krishna therefore says that yogi, one who practices bhakti yoga, therefore has reached a stage where for him, with attachment to Krishna becoming foundational, mind mastery comes effortlessly. Hey Arjuna. Thus Arjuna's ninth question about the possibility of one getting diverted away from the path. Because when one is putting only self-effort all the time, it becomes very difficult to stay on the path. But the moment one is holding Krishna's hand and as Krishna is leading one on the path, there is no scope for getting deviated from the path. The bhakta who realizes Krishna as both the means and the goal, not only has mastered his mind, the chances of getting deviated from the path, which is Arjuna's ninth question. What if after initial enthusiasm, one getting on to this path gets diverted, distracted? What happens? The chances of that happening are no longer there the moment Krishna becomes the guide on this path and Krishna begins to hold one's hand and leads one all the way. Thus, Krishna reassuringly answers Arjuna's questions 8 and 9. And Krishna says here, Arjuna, you must know this. Sadhi bhutadi devam mam sadhi yajnam cha ye viduhu prayana kale vicha mam te vidur yukta chetasaha. The one who knows me in totality, samagram nyasyasi, one who knows me along with Adibhuta, Adidevata, Adiyajna, he will also know me. Prayanakale pichamam, he will also know me fully well, even at the time of the departure from this world, at the time of death. The moment Krishna declares this, Arjuna has a question. Hey Krishna, all of a sudden you have used some very difficult terms for me to understand. What are those terms? You've suddenly said Adibhuta, Adidevata, Adiyajna. And thus Krishna's answer leads to Arjuna's 10th question, which we will take up in the next session. Sarvam Sri Krishna Arpanamastu.